There were always so many rules in the house that always collaborated with the highest rules and expectations of me from the church. To make my parents proud and do my part to make sure that our family would be sealed forever together. And if I broke any rules, for one thing, I'd be losing blessings from the church, and I would be punished at home, and that was always difficult. I used to play with a large collection of wooden Thomas the Tank Engine toys when I was little. Every day I'd just sit in my room and let the tracks spill out across the floor, and had each train lined up according to the social hierarchy in the old shows. And whenever I got punished, I usually got my trains taken away from me, which was the worst thing in the world because I loved Thomas the Tank Engine as a child. And I still hold a strong fondness of the franchise today in spite of that abominable remake for toddlers. And so during my childhood years, I was desperate to follow the rules and not get my trains taken away because that was the biggest punishment that I could ever receive. But the older I got, I learned of far worse punishments, such as losing my eternal family just for being gay. In the church and from other places spread across the world, I was taught that anything under the LGBTQIA plus umbrella was to be rained down upon with ridicule and ignorance and, yes, even death. And that they deserved it too. In our household, the word gay was treated the same as any cuss word, and that to be gay was to be basically sick or evil, something to be mocked and looked down upon if not completely ignored. I've often used homophobic slurs myself before understanding what they meant to other people and what they would mean to me. But I wasn't thinking about the impact of those words. All I could think of was trying to do my best to follow the great plan of salvation and be happy forever and ever, but it just wasn't working for me. I was still just as scared and hurt and angry and confused as I ever was. I was diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome shortly after starting school. This means that I am on the autistic spectrum, which also means that my brain processes things differently. I do things differently than others. I can make connections and see things that nobody else can see. And no, I can't see ghosts. I can't tell people the secrets of the universe or reverse engineer the computer inside the helmet of a predator to make it work for me, or find a door to an alternate dimension to find someone's lost father. I can, however, perceive things differently to offer unique insights and make connections that others probably couldn't or wouldn't be able to make. Although it does make me a bit impulsive at times, which gets me into trouble even today. However, my impulsivity makes me focused. It gives me extreme focus like a laser, and I can get a lot done quickly and effectively. It's not always how it's supposed to be done, but I do it wonderfully and often receive high praise. But based upon my behavior, people in church and at school thought that meant that something was wrong with me. I didn't want to engage with the lessons or play with the other kids, and I think I was disrespectful towards my teachers, although one of them was pretty scary, to be honest. On the first day of public school, I suffered some severe separation anxiety. I was crying, begging to go home, and screaming for my mom. And this one teacher, this woman that I didn't know, just grabbed me by the shoulder and whispered in my ear, "Keep your mouth shut." Menacingly. But in all seriousness, it was pretty terrifying. But after that, I didn't want much of anything to do with the adults in the room. I just wanted to play with the awesome toys, including a very satisfying gel monster Men in Black toy that opened up its back to swallow up the agents. And when I couldn't play with the toys, I shut myself down and hid underneath blankets and pillows that I'm assuming now are for nap time for kindergartners. Because of my dissonance among my classmates and my teacher, I've had the principal called on me multiple times. One time he actually chased me around the room until I gave up and let him grab me. I felt like I was always in trouble every day, which is why I just about pissed my Thomas undies whenever I stepped into the chapel every Sunday morning, because the principal was apparently a member of the bishopric, or maybe a stake leader, I can't remember which exactly, but I couldn't handle being on the front rows with him seated right there in front of me, and I thought he was there for me. So I either froze my seat or hid underneath the benches until the sacrament meeting was finished, and that usually got me in trouble with my parents again, because I was supposed to be listening to the people speaking on the stand, and so as you can probably imagine, I had my trains in less time than I did before going to school. And I think it was shortly after Christmas break of that year that I was transferred out of that school. Because beforehand, I remember taking a series of tests and quizzes outside of the classroom, which apparently determined that I was smart enough to skip a grade, which plus one. But I don't, or I can't properly recall if I met with a psychologist or a mental doctor of some sort. But apparently, that was when I was also officially diagnosed with autism, or specifically with Asperger's. And the last day I recall from my first run at that school was during gym. I didn't want to participate, and so I was sent to the office. I waited a few good long minutes in the lobby before my mom picked me up. She was crying. At that time, I thought it was because of me. The only time I ever was in the office was when I was in trouble, and I thought that it made her sad, which made me feel awful. But but going forward, in the fall of that year, I went to a different school where I got to participate in various and stimulating activities. There was a table full of sand and water toys, bookshelves full of books that could be read at any time, and for a few weeks, while learning about the field development of chickens, we actually got to hatch a carton of baby chicks. And it was probably one of the greatest experiences of my life. But it wasn't any easier for me being amongst other children. I got into fights with a couple other kids, especially one who happened to have Down syndrome and used his disability to get me in trouble for defending myself. Then, I believe after that year, I got transferred again to yet another school. But I think the choice was made that I would be in the same grade as it was the last year so that I could advance with kids my own age. But this school was different from the last one. I was split between two different classes, one with the quote unquote normal kids and one with other gifted kids like myself. Personally, I preferred the latter class because we read books, sang songs, played computer games, and had mini parties just because. The octopus hot dog bubble party what we had in the beginning of the school year remains one of my favorite memories still, even if I almost accidentally drank bubble water, and the timestamp below the photograph of the party suggested to me that the party was a method to distract the kids from the very recent events of 9/11. Yeah. But the water party that we had before that summer was pretty amazing. But however, despite all the fun and learning that I had, there were a few dark spots still. One that I still didn't feel comfortable around the other kids and felt scared whenever large groups of them swarmed around me, and sometimes I found myself being at odds with the other kids. And so, because of my struggles, and at the suggestion of the school, my parents decided to have me medicated with these little blue pills that I recently learned were for ADHD. I hated those pills. I had to go to the nurse's office to take them before the period of playtime I had before school. I usually only had to take half a pill, but it didn't make it any better. The texture and the taste was just horrible, like swallowing chalk or a dry pebble. And on days that I didn't show up for my pill, I would get in trouble. On some of those days when I did take my pill, I would simply hide them in my mouth and then spit them out into the trash. But I would eventually get sick of hiding them and just went along with it. I think what really angers me about them now is that I don't think they were to help me. I think they were just meant to pacify me so that the teachers wouldn't have to worry about me more than the other students. As it happens when schools tell parents to medicate their eccentric children when they aren't sick. But these pills were what really made me sick. I didn't know what did it at first, but it frightened me. Because pretty much every other day on multiple occasions, I found myself just spacing out. I didn't know what was happening to me during my spaces. I couldn't think. I couldn't concentrate. I couldn't concentrate on anything. I was just elsewhere, as if I were falling asleep or experiencing sleep paralysis. And one day it got so bad that it just kept happening over and over and over again until I was just as still and silent like a statue. My teacher noticed that something was wrong and recommended that I get a drink of water. And just as I got to the fountain, I just started spacing again. And this was shortly after Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets came out, and it scared me very much because I thought that it was petrifying, like those kids who saw the basilisk's eyes in their reflections, and I actually thought that I was dying, or that I'd spend the rest of my life as a pale statue, and that scared the shit out of me. And so after my last space out, I got off the pill. But what's worse, nobody called me the next morning or got me a drink afterwards. But yeah, looking back on it now, I realize that in great irony, I wasn't spacing out as much as I was in church because I didn't have to take those pills when I wasn't at school. not as I was while I was medicated, at least. I was spacing out anyways because I was simply bored, like many kids my age. I didn't want to sit still or be quiet. I wanted to stay at home and have fun, play Super Smash Brothers with my brothers, set up my trains, entertain my baby sister when she wasn't making me jealous for not being the youngest anymore, or even go swimming. I love going swimming. I absolutely loved going swimming as a kid. And if you could call what I sorry, I didn't do much swimming per se. It wasn't. I mean, you could call it swimming if you wanted to, but it wasn't much swimming going on. I would often just hold myself underwater and look around because I was just so fascinated by how things looked underwater. My parents called me a fish since I simply couldn't stay out of it long enough. And during my swimming lessons, I would just flop myself back into the pool when I was supposed to be sitting on the ground and paying attention to the instructor. And when I think about it now, I believe that it was my love of the water and the fun of the swimming pool that made me excited for my eventual baptism. When my family attended the baptisms of other kids from the ward, I wanted so badly to just jump into the water because the baptismal pool looked so nice. And while you were just waiting in the water, you got to wear clothes, which I thought was so strange and yet so awesome at the time. The only downsides that came with it was standing barefoot in a large bathroom with a smooth, slimy tiled floor and the coarse and particularly snug ceremonial white baptismal onesies. I didn't really think much about those things, just that I was finally in the baptismal pool like the other boys and that I would receive the Holy Ghost when it was my turn. Someone who would always have my back and compel me to be the best person that I could be. I thought that after I would be baptized that I would finally have a friend, someone who I could talk to whenever I wanted, someone who would hopefully and finally completely understand me when nobody else could. The water was warm, the pool was deep, and the atmosphere was just so peaceful when my dad took my hand and I stepped in. I think we had to repeat the process a few times because I don't think I got the hang of holding my nose while clasping my dad's hand while he dunked me into the water just quite right. But I think by the second or third time we did get it right, and I was so happy. But only for a few seconds. One, because I didn't get to stay in the water longer, and second, because I didn't feel any different. I didn't hear any small voice that didn't come from the memory of any TV show, Thomas movie, or video game that I had memorized. I didn't feel any less alone or scared than I did before, like I had someone watching over me. I was just confused and sad and a little angry at myself, especially because I felt like maybe I did something wrong.